What's up guys, hello to Footballtalk here. We've arrived at the final episode of my divisional draft and roster review series, where I give all 32 NFL franchises between 8 and 12 minutes usually to break down every single draft pick they made, reflect on how those moves fit within the rest of the offseason, and how they've constructed their rosters. We finish up strong here as I actually watched all 31 players the Broncos, Chiefs, Raiders and Chargers collectively selected. I'll give a condensed scouting reports on each of them and discuss what the role of the new teams could look like. For each of those franchises, I'll deliver my general thoughts on what they did here in terms of moving around the board and addressing needs while also finding good value. You can dive even deeper with me by reading up on nearly 140 draft prospects in detail and some other content such as guys that actually didn't get selected but landed in spots where they could contribute early over my site hellotofootballtalk.com that is linked down below in the description. Thanks already to everybody who's followed along for the ride with these videos, and if this is your first time joining me, welcome and feel free to subscribe and catch up on all the other divisions. If you find them interesting and are entertaining, please just hit that like button for me, really appreciate that. Kicking off the final of 8 divisions now, and it's a really interesting one with the Denver Broncos, who in the first round 12th overall selected the quarterback of the future in Bo Nix from Oregon, 3rd round 76th overall Jonah Ellis, edge defender Utah, 4th round 102nd overall Troy Franklin, wide receiver Oregon, a couple of 5th rounders, 145th overall Chris Abrams-Drain, cornerback Missouri, and 2 picks later Audric Estime, running back Notre Dame. In the 7th round, 235th overall Devon Bailey, wide receiver Utah, and 256th overall Nick Gagiolo, interior offensive lineman South Carolina. Of course, beginning at the top with Oregon QB Bo Nix, who transformed himself into a highly efficient passer in a wide-open Oregon offense once he transferred over from Auburn. With his ability to distribute the ball quickly on targets, while he operated underneath a lot, he can put plenty of mustard on the ball to hit honeyhole shots versus cover 2, or let the ball fly with correct leverage down the field. And he's become a master at avoiding sacks, with the way he negates rush angles, understands how the picture changes as he moves around, and creates secondary plays. Just blindly trust play designs at times, even though clearly what you want to hit isn't there. Will have to grow beyond that system, which created a lot of layups for him. And in part due to the nature of that offense, he's not yet at a point where he'll stay on the spot, reset his base as he's working through his progressions. But considering I saw a huge drop between USC's Caleb Williams and North Carolina's Drake May to the rest of the class at the quarterback position, I was pretty high on Nix, as I had him right there with Jaden Daniels, as guys worthy of going over the latter half of the first round. Generally, I wouldn't love getting QB6 at pick 12 already, but considering I did prefer him over 3 guys that went ahead of him, I'm perfectly fine with it, and I love the fit with Sean Payton, putting him in a distributor type role, along with what he can add out of structure already. Denver didn't have a 2nd round pick, still due to the Russell Wilson trade I believe, but got a player in the 3rd that I value, as if they did, and that is Jonah Ellis, the Utah edge. He can fit his hands inside the chest of blockers, has no issues crashing into pulling guards, and highly active to create negative plays in the run game. The flexibility he presents to dip around the corner, often paired with the rip through, or just to reduce his frame as he's looking for secondary escape angles really stands out, and he offers a wide array of rush moves already, which he'll happily access to extended depth, lining up in different spots, including a sudden spin to free himself late at times. He will get his eyes trapped inside of blockers at times and lose contain because of it as the ball bounces out of his way. And too often he has pass rush reps against tackles dictated to him at the initial phase of interaction, as they land the outside hand into his chest, which he then has a tough time disengaging from them. So he's not a perfect player by any means, but someone I really enjoyed watching, and think he can be an impact pressure player pretty early. The different ways he can win combined with the effort he consistently puts on display really won me over. Denver hopes to get a true breakout season finally from a healthy Baron Browning. Jonathan Cooper has been a solid starter for them. Nick Bonito was a 2nd rounder 2 years ago, whose speed off the edge is an asset, and Drew Sanders they got in the 3rd this past year as someone who can play off the ball but also rush the passer. And yet, I can absolutely see Ellis play like 400 snaps and rack up 30 pressures or something like that. Then at the start of day 3, Denver shipped the 5th and a 6th rounder to Seattle in exchange for jumping 19 spots here at the top of the 4th round, while getting a 7th back, as they reunite Bo Nix with his favorite target at Oregon these last 2 years in Troy Franklin. He offers easy ability to gear up and down his routes, being able to threaten defenders vertically from his first step. There's already some advanced footwork and detail to his routes in order to win versus man or zone, but Oregon even put him in the slot to run option routes when teams gave him that space to work with, as Nix had an insane passer rating of 147.8 last season targeting him. Franklin did extremely well to help out his quarterback by adjusting or translating the secondary routes, and he packs that extra gear to detach with the ball laid out in front of him. He does have a very slender frame and struggles to disengage from press defenders with the athletic feet to stay in front of him, and he had a drop rate of nearly 10% last season, but the way he positioned his hands going over the middle of the field specifically was a bit odd. Still, I thought it was a late second rounder instead of to start day 3, and of course you have to love giving a rookie quarterback his favorite target bag to get their pro career started on track together. With Cortland Sutton at the X, Franklin can line up at flanker or in the slot, sort of interchangeable with Marvin Mims hopefully, taking a step in year 2 in an offense that could be quite vertically oriented, and then uses the backs as checkdown options, which Bo happily utilizes after having a downfield posture to give those guys room to work as he flips it to them. At the top of the 5th round, they got someone I had just outside my top 10 corners, with inside-out flexibility in Chris Abrams-Strain from Missouri. He played a lot of soft press at Mizzou, where he did a great job of staying attached during receiver stem, feel the break right coming, and disrupt the catch point. When asked to play match zone, he does a nice job of playing top down with outside leverage, but also in single high structures, turn one way, flip around the hips, and effect secondary routes when stressed space-wise. And I think he has the size and mindset to play the nickel, with his ability to lock out and play contain, blitz a few times, and tackle bigger ball carriers to great effect. Savvy route runners can give him some trouble at the line with fancy footwork and being able to slow play the release, which gets him a little bit off balance, and I think there's room for improvement in his technique at defending back shoulder fades. But really good value here, as someone who finished just outside my personal top 100, gives them flexibility in the secondary as they found the gem in Jaquan McMillan and nickel last year, and brought in veteran Levi Wallace, but Abrams-Strain could start outside across from Pat Surtain on the field side, and if needed jump inside as well. Maybe they run true man coverage at a slightly higher rate now, as Vance Joseph in his heart wants to heat up quarterbacks and lock up those guys on the outside. 2 picks later, they get Audric Estime from Notre Dame, big well-coordinated back at 6 foot 220 pounds, urgently approaches the line of scrimmage with square pads, does well to press creases, and has some pretty good feet to navigate points of pressure. You see him slide or spin off tackles regularly, thanks to the balance he provides, excels in short yardage situations with a nose for the end zone, and he has solid receiving chops when given chances. He's far less effective when not allowed to build up momentum, and when penetration is imminent. The quick twitch to still get around it is somewhat missing. The decision making with blockers in space definitely isn't as good as when he's running between the tackles, and he's not overly creative in the open field. I think if he learns to time up his strikes as a pass protector appropriately, there's potential for him in that regard, and of course the no-nonsense running style for a team that wants to run inside zone and power with that O-line that they've built is an excellent fit. We have Javonte Williams on the final year of his rookie deal, signed veteran Samaje Perine last offseason, and Peyton found himself a favorite in Jalil McLaughlin as a change of pace and pass catching option. Plus they get another undrafted free agent actually, in Blake Watson coming over from Memphis, who could be in the mix here somehow as well, depending on how that depth chart ultimately looks like. But I can see an avenue where Estime finishes second in carries this season for them. Just quickly on the 2 7th rounders, first with the one Whaley, the wide receiver from Utah, 6'4", 205 pounds, cleanly gets off the line, running his routes with good discipline and timing, aggressively works back towards the ball, has a large catch radius with 33.5-inch arms, has reliable hands, and can gain good chunks and crosses and stuff with those long strides. Most importantly here maybe, he provides good urgency and ability to slide in front of defenders as a run blocker. He lacks dynamism or the power to create separation naturally as a route runner. He needs to learn how to effectively stack DBs vertically, and I don't think he offers a whole lot of juice once the ball is in his hands. He'll be competing with Lil Jordan Humphrey for wide receiver 6 most likely, and then Nick Agiolo, the interior O-lineman from South Carolina. Thick build at 6'5", 215 pounds with 34-inch arms, comes off the ball with a purpose and does well to get his pace around for reach or scoop blocks, better than you'd expect for his stature. He's patient in his pass sets, keeping his elbows in tight with sticky hands, and his lateral redirection skills are a plus, but his initial power and balance to sustain blocks in the run game is underwhelming, and the transition to a Power 5 conference reflected in significantly higher pressure numbers this past season, where some weight distribution issues popped up. But a 36-game starter between Yale and South Carolina, between 3 different spots to add some depth to an O-line with very few proven commodities beyond that front line. So I don't mind that. Altogether, I really liked what the Broncos did here. You get the quarterback of the future, who is an awesome fit with your head coach, and you get him his favorite target from Oregon a good round later than where he should have probably gone. My number 6 edge also about a round late in my opinion, and the same is true for Borderline top 10 corner in the 5th, with the ability to play inside and out. Estimate about valued him, but could be a fairly productive back who makes sense for the way they want to run the ball. Along with a couple of guys in the 7th, I think will be competing for roster spots at positions where they weren't super deep. if there was one thing I would have liked to see them do, it would have been taking another shot at linebacker at some point, but it wasn't a great class by any means, and no need to force a pick if you don't feel like there was good value to be found. As always, when you take a quarterback up high, if he can be a legit franchise guy will determine how everybody looks back at this class, but I think they've set him up in a way to find early success without having to trade up, even though Peyton has to make this work, because new ownership has enough money to not care about paying another man not to coach if they feel like change is necessary coming off a disappointing year. Bringing us to a team that had a very successful year, but their offseason hasn't looked great so far, and that is the Kansas City Chiefs, who in the first round 24 overall selected Xavier Worthy, wide receiver Texas, second round 63rd overall Kingsley Suamataia, offensive tackle BYU, a couple of fourth rounders, 131st overall Jared Wiley, tight end TCU, and 2 picks later Jaden Hicks, safety Washington State. In the 5th round, 159th overall Hunter Norset, interior O-lineman out of Penn State, 6th round 211th overall Kamal Haddon, cornerback Tennessee, and then in the 7th round 248th overall CJ Hansen, interior O-lineman out of Holy Cross. Starting with Worthy, I already declared the Bills as the winners of this first round trade pretty much, when I said it was ridiculous that some people made fun of them for handing Kansas City Worthy, when really they got the receiver I had one spot ahead of the Texas Speedster in my positional rankings, in Florida State's Keon Coleman ultimately, along with moving up by a full round from the 4th and 7th each. So based on that, you can already hear that I think KC gave up too much here for a player that I still believe was early. That doesn't mean there isn't a whole lot to get excited about as well though. Obviously this guy's record-breaking speed with his 4.21 that he ran at the combine, which you see vertically as well as horizontally come into play. He can use that to scatter defense, put guys in the heels, and then suddenly whip those hips around to create openings for himself, with some nasty deep outs and comebacks on tape. You can clearly tell that he's worked on his ability to track the deep ball, and you see Steve Sarkisian at Texas make it a big priority to put the ball in his hands with space, where his ability to gear up or down effortlessly killed plenty of angles. He didn't face a lot of press coverage, and when he did face more physical defensive backs who weren't worried about getting run by, especially with help over the top, he got thrown off significantly. He doesn't give you a whole lot in contested catch situations at 165 pounds, and he still drops a few more passes than you'd like to see. So I thought this was about a round early for a somewhat limited player, even understanding the intrigue he brings. Worthy is definitely more than a track star, and he's shown improvement during his collegiate career, but there aren't a lot of guys of his stature without top tier hands that actually become high volume producers in the league. I'm guessing if they knew Rashee Rice will continue to try throwing his career away, they might have opted for a different type of receiver, but the space he can clear up with Worthy and Hollywood Brown now is interesting with how Travis Kelce bounced back during the playoff run, as someone who just eats up that space that is presented to him. Then in the 2nd round with Kingsley Suamataia, the BYU offensive tackle. This is one trade that happened in the middle of day 2 that I actually missed initially, and thought this might have been done a while ago, as the Chiefs and 49ers swapped the final 2 picks of the 2nd round, where Kansas City grabs the BYU tackle, while San Francisco gets Florida State cornerback Ronaldo Green, who I had high on my board personally, and I think would have been a pretty clean replacement for L'Jarius Sneed after trading him to Tennessee, dropping on 38 spots from the end of the 5th to the 6th round. I'm not sure if anybody else was on the phone with the Niners, but that can be questioned for sure. As for Suamataia, 6'5", 325-pound tackle with heavy hands and the ability to roll his hips for contact in order to create displacement in the run game. Yet he can cover plenty of ground in wide zone, fly up to the 2nd level in a hurry, and get to extended landmarks and long pulls in impressive fashion. As for his pass protection skills, he's a pretty easy mover with those large dimensions, can use his hands independently, and has a nearly unbreakable ankle it seems like when people try to go through him. Doesn't yet center his blocks and apply force ultimately in the run game, while he's also pushing people around at times. And right now he's reliant on his shuffle pass set, while he's not covering a ton of ground to match speed off the edge, and has to still learn how to really frame rushers. So I'm not sure if his best spot at the next level is actually tackle, at least early on. If so, he's certainly not ready to be a plus start at this point. And that's why it's a bit confusing to me, because they really needed a left tackle, but Wanya Morris would otherwise be slated to start as a 2nd-year player who got 4 starts last year due to necessity. So combining the fact that they traded up here, and I don't see the player being a great solution for Patrick Mahomes' blindside right now, I don't love it either. Although I do acknowledge that I was a little bit lower on Kingsley than consensus. Next we've got Jared Wiley, the TCU tight end, a long athletic mover who transitioned from quarterback a couple of years ago only, but already shows some impressive skills for the position, can work combo blocks with his tackle on the edge or secure targets in space with active feet and well-positioned hands. While as a receiver he's pretty sudden in and out of his breaks, can vary speed, swallows the ball with those large mids, and then can run away from linebackers and even safeties at times in a foot race. Lacks sufficient width and mass to his frame to be considered an inline option, leading to him lunging a lot as a run blocker, while coming in wide with those hands. Finding space with his zone is a skill that he's yet to acquire, and he won't blow from any attempted tackles. So I thought it was more so in line with where value should have been valued compared to some people saying he should go top 100. Interesting fit now, as we may look at him as more of a big slot to complement that speed they've now added to that room generally. Depending on that, or if they look at him as an eventual replacement for Kelsey, which is an impossible task pretty much obviously, I could see his production vary a lot in year 1 depending on that role. A couple of picks later they get someone who will cover Wiley a lot in practice, and that is Jaden Hicks, the Washington State safety. Love the energy and level of physicality this guy provides with his downhill mindset in the run game and the ability to drop down into the box. Does a great job of midpointing route combinations as his own defender, looks for work when there's nobody in his vicinity, and he has the hitting power to separate receivers from the ball when he arrives there. Plus he has the sturdy frame and athletic feet to challenge tight ends early in the routes and then stay attached to them. Not the most comfortable at flipping his hips with vertical routes, which can become an issue in split field safety looks as the offense pushes guys at him, and his quickness and ability to come to balance to bring dynamic ball carriers to the ground in open field situations is a bit of a concern, so I had Hicks down as my number 7 safety, but this was still a good round later than where I expected him to go. I think there are more worries about how he fits into a match-based defensive system due to the lack of comfort he has to turn and run with guys, but of course I really like what he can bring going forward. Jabari Conner saw the field a lot more late last season for KC, but I think defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo will find a role with how many DBs he likes to use alongside Justin Reed and Brian Cook, while Hicks gives him some options down the road when he has to make some decisions between fairly similar skill sets at the position. Let's speed things up now for the final 3 names. Hunter Dorsett, the interior O-lineman of Penn State, crafty 6-year senior center, who started at Cornell before spending the last 2 years at Penn State, switching from guard to the pivot this past year. Takes care of back blocks, climbs up to the second level under good control, and was regularly asked to kick out the end man on the line of scrimmage. Quick to slide in front of interior rushers, line up to either shoulder of him, generally does a good job of keeping him at the end of his reach, with some highly impressive reps of staying square against active lateral movements. Isn't going to blow straight nose tackles off the landmark significantly, and generally gets his pads too far over his knees trying to create knockback, while gets himself into trouble at times for oversliding and lunging into quick sets. Solid value in the 5th round and can be a legit backup for the 3 interior spots, depending on how they handle Kingston Suamataia early on. And also group in CJ Hansen here from Holy Cross, a lot more aggressive in the run game, churning his legs through the target in order to create vertical displacement, has a knack for talking the paths of the linemen, and you see him send edge defenders or linebackers airborne when given a runway as a puller. While in pass pro, he operates with good flexion in his lower body and tight elbows, adjusts his technique according to the front he faces, very active in refitting his hands, with impressive flexibility to stay connected and some nasty to him to finish on top of guys. Similarly to Norseth, he gets way too far over his skis trying to blow defenders off the ball, while his hands aren't always placed optimally, and he could stand to lead his lateral movements with his feet instead of allowing rushers to get to the edges of his frame early in the rep. But within the final 10 picks of the entire draft, Adam is a late round gem that could legitimately see the field in a backup capacity, and in between those we had Kamal Haddon, the Tennessee corner, well-built outside corner who maximizes his length to challenge receivers off the line with bouncy feet to stay in front of them, can bail out of those looks and cover plenty of ground in half or 3/4 turns to stay on top of routes or midpoint stuff as a high-low defender. His advanced numbers last season were pretty insane, with just under 100 yards and no touchdowns allowed on 33 targets, earned the 3rd highest PFF coverage rate of any corner in the country. Unfortunately, he doesn't play as big in run defense or gives you that type of effort, while too often banging shoulder or head first into ball carriers, as he missed nearly 17% of attempted tackles in his career, and he allows his momentum to carry him too far up the field at times as receivers position themselves for back shoulder balls or work back down the sideline, well worth to get a long pressman corner in the mold of L'Jarius Sneed after they traded him to Tennessee a couple of months ago. So as I look at this class as a whole, I was a big fan of what they did with the final 4 selections. Unfortunately, the first 2 were pretty lackluster for me, considering I thought there were better players available at both those positions, and guys that can immediately contribute for the reigning champs, while in the 4th is just about fine. If you're getting a guy in Kingsley who ends up as your 6th man on the O-line because he's not ready to deal with NFL edge rushers as a week 1 starting left tackle, and you have to sign a tertiary free agent out there on the market, while Worthy has some limitations in how you attack defenses with him, Over a more well-rounded route runner on the outside, and all our defense is to overload one side. Since Travis Kelce isn't necessarily the guy anymore, you want to isolate it on the backside. That'll hold them back, or at least make things tougher for them, since they did somehow make it work ultimately last season, and I don't want to question them already again. But I was underwhelmed, not gonna lie, and I'm generally not a huge fan of what they do over the first 2 days of the draft at least, which, if we're being honest with ourselves, unless it's offensive or defensive line, or getting what might end up being the greatest quarterback we've ever seen, they haven't been a very strong drafting team early at least, and the general manager Brad Veach. They just get guys that fit with what they like to do, they coach them up, they bring in some hungry veterans, and figure it out somehow around Pat, Travis, and Chris Jones. Let's now move on though to the Las Vegas Raiders, who in the first round 13th overall selected Brock Bowers, tight end Georgia, second round 44th overall Jackson Powers Johnson, interior O-lineman Oregon, third round 77th overall Delmar Glaze, offensive tackle Maryland, fourth round 112th overall Decameron Richardson, cornerback Mississippi State, fifth round 148th overall Tommy Eichenberg, linebacker Ohio State, sixth round 28th overall Dylan Laube, running back New Hampshire, and then 2 7th rounders, 223rd overall Trey Taylor, safety Air Force, and then 6 picks later, MG Devonshire, cornerback Pittsburgh. Kicking things off with Bowers, tight end, H-back, big slot, exit times, just an offensive weapon with juice off the line, the ability to drop his weight and make sharp transitions, but also nudge off guys at the top of the route. Has excellent hand-eye coordination and ball tracking skills along with strong hands in tight space, or guys coming over his back, and then it's just a nightmare to bring down, because he does have that extra gear with the ball in his hands, and was just running through SEC defenders. While as a blocker, he offers a good first strike and great effort with driving his legs, and in space he's well coordinated and fundamentally sound at securing moving targets. He's a little undersized for playing in line at just over 230 pounds, and bigger edge defenders were able to dictate terms to him at times in the run game. And we don't have any testing numbers on him, which might be why he wasn't a top 10 pick, as I think he's someone with better build-up speed than instant explosion necessarily. But this was my number 8 overall prospect, and I think looking at him as a traditional tight end is foolish, even though I do understand the benefits of a more high value position in terms of a pure dollar perspective. This was pretty surprising as a team that was never really linked to Bowers after taking Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame early in the second round last year. But that's here de facto why, and Bowers can really line up at any receiver spots that you need him to. So I expect those two on the field for about half of the snaps last season at least, as long as they're both healthy. And now with Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, we have plenty of size and a really strong receiving corps generally. Now it's about who emerges and actually throws them the ball. Next, Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, right there with Duke's Graham Barton as my 2 top-ranked interior O-linemen, 6'3", 330 pounds with good density and power to ride defenders down the line on zone concepts, or step to his guards and push the tackles backwards on vertical combos. We also love this guy on the move, whether he's reach blocking on a 2-eye, pulls around the corner, or levels defensive backs in the screen game with plenty of burst. As a pass protector, he can really activate those joints in his lower body to anchor against power, yet he can also mirror spin moves or push blitzing linebackers off track, trying to take wider paths around him. The biggest thing right off the jump, if you'll be playing center at the next level, is fixing some inconsistency in terms of snap placement, and generally he plays a little too tall and has some coordination issues, trying to climb up to patient linebackers who can suddenly sidestep him. But for a 1-year start at Oregon, the mental fortitude is pretty damn impressive, and he offers plenty of potential to improve still with his combination of size and athletic tools. James signed a 3-year, $24 million extension in the middle of March, so I think the plan is to plug JPJ in at right guard after letting veteran Gregory Roden walk, and they hope Thea Munford steps up as he takes on a right tackle gig, unless Delmar Glaze from Maryland can beat him out right away. We'll talk about here next. He did start at left tackle for the Terrapins this past year, but did lock down the right side the prior 1.5 seasons. Offers a compact build and impressive athleticism, paired with 35-inch arms and over 10-inch hands, urgent out of his stance and packs the force in his hands to get defenders turned initially, but also the snappy hips to execute backside cutoffs, and the fluidity to snatch up bodies on the second level. In dropback situations, he brings a rapid first kick, doesn't stop his feet as he throws his punch, shows his stout base in general, and once those mitts are inside, the grip strength made it nearly impossible for guys to get away anymore. That being said, he gets too top heavy and needs to learn how to actively latch and sustain blocks better than the run game. And along with coming in wide with his arms, he's pretty unorthodox with his footwork, dealing with speed off the edge, with savvy NFL rushers, will be able to take him off balance more regularly. So I think there's some projection here as well, and this was definitely early for me, but I do think this guy has starting level traits, If he does win the job, I think there'll be some struggles, even though I prefer his upside to Munford's. 4th round, Cameron Richardson from Mississippi State, 6'2", 190-pound pressman corner with calm feet, good balance to mirror off the line, and the long speed to hang with speedsters on goal balls, deep post and such. His makeup gear when there are multiple yards of separation, such as when he bites on double moves, or stays low as the receiver comes in behind him in zone coverage, to still re-enter the picture with the ball hanging up in the air really stands out. Plus with 32.5-inch arms to keep his frame clean, and with good suddenness to elude blockers, he corrals the ball coming to the corner, and he slings guys down pretty reliably. Takes a little bit of time to flip his hips around when receivers get him to lean the wrong way originally, and then he can get pretty grabby, and he rarely turns and actually tries to locate the ball, with 0 career interceptions to show for himself. This is a guy I didn't even watch initially with how insanely deep this corner class is, but suddenly he rose up to 16th among the 42 guys I ended up evaluating. I think there's a lot to like here, and for a team that supposedly had a coin toss to decide between Bowers and Alabama cornerback Terran Arnold with the first pick, because they really needed to address that position, I think this guy competes with Jack Jones and Jacorin Bennett for a starting spot outside right away. 4 more guys that deserve to be discussed here extensively, but I'll try to be a bit more concise. Starting with Tommy Eichenberg, the Ohio State linebacker, solidly built starting linebacker for the Buckeyes these last 2.5 years, with excellent instincts and ability to navigate around traffic in the run game, finding a good balance between IDing the blocking scheme and tracking the ball, while using his hands more like a pass rusher. Make sure to initiate contact and fill targets working across his face in zone coverage, takes excellent angles towards the ball when it's thrown in front of him, and as a blitzer, he consistently takes optimal paths to the quarterback. I think he lacks the pure speed to run things down to the perimeter for small gains, while in coverage he's also regularly a step slow or hand short of actually making plays on the ball. He didn't do a whole lot other than shallow zone drops in terms of pass coverage responsibilities, and his PFF grade plummeted this past year. This was my number 6 linebacker, and while I like this 2022 tape much better, he supposedly was a little bit banged up, and I think he can be a starter in this league if you put him in a little bit of a box, paired with a more rangy running mate on the second level. Robert Spillane was really good for them last year, but if they run base, he could battle Divine Diablo as a converted safety for snaps. Dylan Lowry, the New Hampshire running back, arguably the top receiving back in this class with real technical savvy as a route runner, the twitch to create separation option stuff, his hands are always aligned optimally, and he's creative in the open field. But he was also highly productive as a runner as well, being able to keep guys on the second level guessing, hitting jump cuts to get the open space, sharp vertical transitions, and then he has an incredible knack for turning shoulders away from potential tacklers, string moves together effectively, and churn forward to bleed out runs. Doesn't have a whole lot of power to drive through defenders in the hole for additional yardage, and lacks a true breakaway gear, and where he needs to improve as a runner is that he needs to listen to his instincts, or make it a bigger priority versus aggressive defenses to take quick cutback lanes when the front side is being overloaded. I thought this was one of the more useful, versatile running backs in this class, with experience running from under center or shotgun, single back and I formation, splitting out as a receiver, or running downfield routes from the backfield. So I expect him to beat out Amir Abdullah and eat into the workload of both Zamir White and Alexander Madison to some degree, at least on passing downs. Safety Trey Taylor from Air Force, the other nephew of Ed Reed, after talking about Tulane wide receiver Jaquan Jackson last week, now on the Titans. Taylor of course playing the same position as his Hall of Fame uncle, and I think he was being severely underrated in this process, ultimately finishing as my 13th ranked safety. Does a great job of sorting through traffic and using his hands proactively to avoid getting hung up with blockers, regularly walked down lanes and would fill the C gap with conviction, was tasked with a variety of assignments in zone coverage, where he showed smooth transitions and good communication skills, while when manned up, he reads the hips of the receiver and trusts his eyes to react aggressively on the break, disrupting the catch points. Has a tendency of getting pulled too far to one side based on the route concept, or his eyes getting trapped in the backfield on play action when he was put in deep post assignments, and can run himself into traffic at times, getting too far up the field against the run, where he then has to redirect towards the sideline for bigger gains. The Raiders got another safety in the 5th round from Georgia, and Chris Smith last year, who I like quite a bit, but I think Taylor might be the team's number 3 safety, and sees the field quite a bit as a 7th rounder. Love that. Lastly, MJ Devonshire, the cornerback from Pittsburgh, a guy who plays with a definite athletic confidence, to where we rarely see him overreact to the break points, because he's not worried about guys running away from him, shows pretty loose hips to flip around after initially opening up one way with the release, or snap the other way with a secondary route when stressed as his own defender. Features a surprisingly large wingspan for being 5'11" that helps him rack up PBUs and secure tackles in space as a disciplined contained defender. Good route runners are frequently able to push Devonshire too far up the field and beat him on curls as they swipe away the corner's arm and work back down the stem. He can get pretty grabby with his back turned to the quarterback, and even when he's in phase or generally in control of the routes, he repeatedly initiates contact early. Still, to get a highly competitive loose corner in the 7th round, when quite a few are ranked behind him had already been picked, that's a really nice add for that lighter room as described. And I thought the Raiders did a pretty damn good job here overall. The Bowers pick in the 1st round was unexpected because we thought they were a potential quarterback team and we probably were trying to move up, but by the time they were on the clock, all 6 guys were already taken. But they didn't panic, still found a definite starter at right guard, and someone who at least competes for the tackle spot, as that side of the line looked like it might be a major problem going forward. I could see Tommy Eichenberg start some games for them as well as this season. They got arguably a top receiving back, who can absolutely contribute in the run game as well. And then through picks at that secondary, which defensive coordinator Patrick Graham has made work, largely despite limited talent, as they run a wide Rolodex of coverages. But now they have some more horses to play man or just be a little more static, get not get killed for it. Quarterback remains the biggest question mark, of course, with Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew competing for the starting job. And the one thing I wish they had done here is take a swing sometime on day 3 at the position. I threw out the idea of the Falcons trying to fix the mess they've created, potentially with Kirk Cousins when he isn't healthy by a certain point, and rookie Michael Penix is throwing laces at practice in his absence. But you just don't really see moves like that, and I don't know how the financial side of this could be handled. If you put that aside, I thought they had one of the better pure drafts across the league, especially looking at some of the guys they identified on day 3, based on my evaluations and some of the people I respect in the industry. Very interesting season ahead for them. And we finish up this extensive series now with the Los Angeles Chargers, who in the 1st round 5th overall selected Joe Alt, offensive tackle Notre Dame, 2nd round 34th overall Ladd McConkey, wide receiver Georgia, 3rd round 69th overall Junior Colson, linebacker Michigan, 4th round 105th overall Justin Eboigbe, interior D lineman out of Alabama, 2 cornerbacks in the 5th round, 137th overall Tyreek Still from Maryland, and 3 picks later Ken Hart from Notre Dame, 6th round 181st overall Kamani Vidal, running back Troy, and then 2 wide receivers in the 7th round, Brandon Rice from USC and Cornelius Johnson from Michigan. Joe Alt is up first here. As most people expected, this new regime wanted to set the tone by tackling the trenches with an offensive tackle, and while there was a lot of smoke out there for Alabama's J.C. Latham, who went just a couple of picks later to Tennessee, they took the top gun consensus boards in Alt, who is a 6'9", 315-pound former tight end convert with supreme athletic tools and a long reach, already really sound fundamental as a run blocker, being able to reduce that height, latch his hands and move big men off the marks, including on some impressive long balls across the formation, where he has to gather and secure smaller moving targets. He was only charged with 1 sack and 12 other pressures across nearly 800 pass blocking snaps these last 2 years combined, thanks to the nimble feet to cut off angles, being able to guide speed rushers beyond the quarterback, and having eyes to decipher different games up front. I don't see an overpowering run blocker necessarily, however, and the fluidity to deal with slanting D linemen or guys backdooring him isn't optimal, while using his hands more so to catch rushers at the initial phase of pass protection, rather than delivering impact and setting the tone. So a person at Olo Fashanu from Penn State just a spot ahead of him, but I understand that the college tape for Alt was insanely clean, and saying he's maxed out already simply isn't true. The question now is how quickly he can adapt to switching over to the right side, since the Chargers already had an all-pro level guy at left tackle Rashawn Slater. If he can make the transition go smoothly, even after showing improvements in prior years, Alt will be a massive upgrade over what they got in Trey Pipkins last year. When the Bolts moved up 3 spots at the top of day 2, I thought it might be to double down on the O-line or beef up the interior defensive line, but instead they did address the wide receiver position here with Ladd McConkey from Georgia, after most of the fans wanted Malik Neighbors 5th overall. I think you can make a strong argument that McConkey plus Alt is better than Neighbors plus whichever tackle they could have gotten here with the run at the position that we saw. What I didn't like seeing was what happened with the 4th they gave the Patriots in return for the 5th round as they moved up here. UCF wide receiver Javon Baker was the 80th overall player on my big boards, while Tyreek Still, who the Chargers selected in the 5th instead, wasn't even a top 30 corner for me. Not to jump too far ahead here. Either way, as for Ladd now, really polished route runner for any college receiver, being able to change up tempo, throwing false indicators, being super efficient with his movements, and routinely creating separation. Yet you don't want to label this guy as a slot only, because he actually spent nearly 80% of snaps outside this past season, and he'll run by you with that 4.9 speed in a hurry, along with having elite agility numbers. You also see that after the catch, where he regularly makes the first man miss, has enough strength to slide off partial hits, has a great feel for angles, and can run away from people. He does have more of a lean frame, where he may have a tough time getting off contact against physical press guys, or trying to outmuscle them for positioning once the ball is in the air. Going to the pros, he'll need to eliminate some excess steps to become more efficient instead of fooling the beast with his routes. Nevertheless, this was right in line with where I valued McConkey, and I think while he's on the smaller end, he makes sense for Harbaugh and offensive coordinator Greg Roman as a smart invested blocker to support the run game. Along with having the vertical component, he offers off-play action. Yet when they put him in the slot against more static zone looks, he and Justin Herbert could eat away at them, similar to what we saw from Keenan Allen for so many years there, with Quentin Johnson having to still fix multiple things to live up to his first round status from a year ago. Josh Palmer is more of your number 2 to free himself. I wouldn't be shocked if the rookie leads them in catches and receiving yards. In the third round, Junior Colson, the Michigan linebacker. Of course, Jim had to get one of his big leaders at a definite position of need. Colson brings good size and short area burst, along with playing with his hair on fire to shoot for lanes or charge into linemen in order to create disruption in the run game. Makes his presence felt as a hook dropper, is patient in man coverage against running backs, and when he has a chance to rally up and tackle, he's highly dependable with getting guys to the ground. Along with being a rugged blitzer who goes right for the chest of backs waiting for him, happily explodes into linemen to free up fellow rushers, and lights up quarterback when he gets a chance to. You see him get pulled off his space too much by eye candy, and I don't think he has the best redirection skills to make up for false steps. While as a coverage defender, I don't think he's the smoothest mover or someone who can carry wide receivers when a structure of the coverage asks him to occasionally. That being said, I didn't think Harbaugh and new general manager Joe Ortiz reached here at all to give defensive coordinator Jesse Minter the key cog to that Wolverines defense back, who they can build it during the rounds, and they fully understand the role he excels in, as the scheme they ran is very much what you see as the new trend around the league, which former Ravens defensive coordinator and now Seahawks head coach Mike Macdonald really helped popularize after spending a year at Michigan installing it. I believe Colson starts more games than Denzel Perriman for them, and now you pair him with last year's third round pick Deion Henley, who I believe had an argument as the top back in that class. That could be a really good and cheap young duo for a while now. Justin Boygby from Alabama in the 4th round, a jumbo-sized beastie end for Bama, when they weren't even fronts on early downs, at 6'5", 290 pounds, but he has that versatility with long arms and heavy hands, along with the feel for blocking angles to move along the line. In the pass game, that length and ability to create separation from interior blockers can create problems as well. Showcases excellent timing on twists or three-man games, and understands when he can alter his approach on the fly, along with generally having a high level of activity with his hands. Not much of a quick twitch playmaker in the run game, and when he does get his pads turned early, he has kind of a rough time to still find anchor points, limited change of direction skills and flexibility, which particularly show up in the pass game and his productivity in that regard. So a little early for me, but once again I understand the idea of getting bigger and more physical in the trenches, with a player who could be a strong side at the end at times, but also rush over the center for a team that has been rather soft at the span of the defense. They get a couple of corners at the start of the round, first with Tariq Still from Maryland. I talked about as a reach actually, as he was all the way down there as my 37th ranked corner in a very deep class to be fair here. Like the patience, willingness to put his hands on guys and stay connected in man coverage, sorts for route combinations at an advanced level already with busy eyes and understanding when to fall off his man, while having a wide receiver background in high school that show up in his ball skills, being able to sidestep blocking receivers and hit with a square chest. But an average athlete with arms just short of 30 inches tends to overextend at the release point and lacks that makeup gear to close that gap still, way too handsy at this point, and simply lacks the mass to bring bigger ball carriers to the ground consistently. While Cam Hart from Notre Dame I thought was actually a significantly better player and about 20 spots higher in the positional rankings. Very different profile as a super long, physical and fast outside corner, yet rather than relying on being able to crowd receivers at the line, I thought it was his anticipation for the break point that really stood out to me. Never gave up a completion of over 40 yards and excels at wrapping around the intended target for PBUs. Showcases some pretty impressive change of direction skills for that height and an understanding for his landmarks and zone assignments, while using that length well to press off blockers and being a face-up tackler. Needs to do a better job of hand fighting or not allowing wideouts to stack him on vertical routes, while lacking that 0 to 100 shift some other guys have. You see moments where Hart looks back for the ball whilst running down the field, yet doesn't make a play on it or the hands of the receiver, and because he had surgeries on both shoulders in college to some degree probably, he had a 16% career missed tackle rate. But once again, I look at Hart as the guy that actually competes for a starting job, in particular if Christian Fulton is the new boundary guy, in a system that allows those guys to use their physicality early in the route development. A bit worried about the medical history, but it doesn't really show up on his tape, and if he learns how to play the ball more optimally, I think they feel comfortable, maybe even moving Fulton into the slot during his one-year deal, but at least the preferred option by 2025. Kamani Waddell from Troy, quite the steal as a pretty damn complete back in the 6th round, I believe. Built like a bowling ball, and that's what he plays like when he gets to the 2nd or even 3rd level. But for a bigger guy, Waddell's lateral quicks, the deal with points of penetration, how he presses creases vertically, and then hits jump cuts or slices inside of defenders with the burst to get out to the corner is highly impressive. Also brings soft hands, and as a pass protector, the punchy packs combined with the low center of gravity allow him to stonewall blitzes regularly. While Waddell can stop his feet very well, it's the re-acceleration part that leaves you wanting more, as lanes end up closing on him again, his top end gear is somewhat missing, and as good as the high-end reps in pass per hour, he needs to eliminate a few moments where he gets over-aggressive lunging into contact. But man, I like the former Ravens guys. As a Baltimore fan myself, and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards, they fit very well with what LA wants to do in terms of the downhill run game, but Dobbins coming off the torn Achilles, Gaspas on a 1+1 deal, and Best is part of a committee. I can see a world where this guy leads the position snaps, at least the start of a next season, as crazy as that may sound. And then the two big wideouts to finish up in Brandon Rice from USC and Cornelius Johnson from Michigan. Brandon obviously the son of the greatest receiver of all time in Jerry Rice, while Johnson was the X for the Michigan offense these last couple of years under Jim. I don't think either one of them necessarily is great at attacking the edges of defensive backs and threatening them early in the route, but Johnson has more build-up speed, while Rice is better at using his body to maintain favorable positions for the arrival of the ball. Where I really like Rice is running slant routes, where he slightly stems outside, flips the hips around, and then forces guys to go through him if they want to contest the pass. He also extends for the ball consistently, regularly draws flags with the way he takes advantage of his frame, and is strong like an ox to drive through wraps and stretch for additional yardage. Johnson to me is someone you want to send down the field a little bit more, continuing to fight the hands of DBs and winning down the post quite regularly, where he displays great hand-eye coordination and can post up guys in the vertical game, and he's a no-nonsense guy with the ball in his hands. Neither one of them has the initial quickness, ability to reduce their frame or drop their weight to separate from guys on an extensive route tree I believe, but both are smart blockers with good grip strength to stay attached and can be trusted with crackbacks or pin downs when the offense wants to get the ball to the perimeter. So they'll be in direct competition now that they brought in DJ Chark as a free agent, and Darius Davis was a day 3 pick for them last year as someone who offers some great return skills. When I look at this class, the first 3 guys were basically exactly in line with where I valued them, then they picked the next 2 guys a little bit early. Cam Hart again was a little later than where I had him. I loved the Waddell pick and finally took a couple of worthwhile shots at big outside receivers in the 7th round. So from a player evaluation standpoint, I think this was in the above average category rather than up there with some of my favorite classes, but in the context of how Jim Harbaugh, his coordinators, Joe Ortiz, and the rest of the operation want to mold the roster in their image to establish a culture and way they want to win, I do think they did a really nice job and get a boost for how well they executed that plan. They should be significantly better at right tackle and the spine of the defense with familiar faces, including the Blue Dog guy off that Wolverine defense for coordinator Jesse Minter, where if he ends up winning that battle, could legitimately be a rookie sort of teaching veterans how the system is being run. Did I think pairing Herbert with a dynamo like LSU wide receivers, as many of the Chargers fans were begging for, would be really fun? Absolutely. But at the same time, with how the board ended up falling, the fact that the top 3 tackles were already gone by the time they made the 2nd selection, they get the much better duo, in case they had otherwise reached in that position. This brings us to a final divisional recap, where I stack what these 4 AFC West teams were able to do from a drafting perspective against one another. And I'm gonna put the Broncos at number 1. They got my number 3 quarterback Bo Nix and number 8 receiver Troy Franklin, who are creating magic together at Oregon these last 2 years, and they got the latter part of the tandem at the top of day 3. In between those, they selected my number 6 edge, who kinda adds a different dimension rushing the passer in Jonah Ellis. What I thought was a fringe top 100 corner with alignment versatility, a power back with good feet, plus a couple of depth pieces on offense on day 3. Obviously this ranking reflects that I personally was a lot higher on Nix compared to the rest of the quarterback class, but if Sean Payton handpicked a guy I believe has legit franchise potential and makes that work, combined with the other pieces here that I really like, this could be a defining group of young players for a franchise that is kinda looking for direction right now. I'll put the Raiders 2nd, no idea who's starting at the center for them week 1 or what the plan is long term, and I really wish they had brought in someone in the later rounds when there were some interesting names available. That being said, the players they were able to stack up through those 3 days will make the team significantly better. Brock Bowers may not be a player that many linked to them in mock drafts, but was a top 10 player for pretty much everybody I respect across the industry. He addressed the right side of the O-line with at least one definite starter, who I had a first round grade on. Day 3 heavy on addressing a questionable back 7 defensively, with guys at good value, plus one of my favorite late round backs, who could be the primary third down option as a rookie already. Chargers at 3 for me, and once again this is far less about them than just how well the 2 teams above them did. Just discussed that the value across the board for the players they selected was good already, and then the message it sends what type of team you want to be makes a ton of sense. By 2025 I could legitimately see 5 or maybe even 6 of the first 7 picks start for them, at least based on what they're slated to have on the roster by then. Even if Joe Alt is just an average start at right tackle as a rookie, Ladd McConkey leads them in catches, and linebacker Junior Colson starts in the middle of that defense that he's obviously fully familiar with, that's a win in my book. And finally, I do think there's quite a significant gap between the Chiefs at the bottom and the rest of the division. Obviously not in terms of what these teams will be in 2024, as they should remain the favorites to repeat as Super Bowl champs, and we have yet to see a team consistently challenge them just in the regular season among these, outside of the occasional head-scratching meeting that KC doesn't come out of victorious. But I really don't love what they did here, getting a guy with record-breaking speed, but not someone I think maybe a high-volume target as a rookie at least, and someone I don't think is ready to start left tackle in year 1 with the first 2 picks. I did like the players they got on day 3 quite a bit, but not to a level where I would lift them above the rest of the group, especially if you weigh the premium picks more heavily. Now this actually marks the end of the series I've been working hard on over the last month, and really all started in late January when I started diving into this draft class. I'm exhausted to be honest. I hope you enjoyed the ride, or if this is your first one of these episodes that you were able to catch, this video specifically. Thankfully there are 7 more available if you're interested, as I give detailed insight in the newest NFL players and the roster constructions of all 32 teams. Thank you so much for however much time you spent listening to me. If you did find it useful, entertaining or whatever, please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't done so yet. And please, if you appreciate the work I've put into all of this, taking half a minute to send the link to a couple of your friends and tell them to check it out would mean the world to me as we continue to grow this channel together. Thanks again in advance. As for me, I'll be back next week already in written form however at hello@footballtalk.com with a piece on the most improved position groups across the NFL, taking a couple of steps back from this microanalysis I've been doing to look at some trends around the league and identify units that should look significantly better than they did a year ago. If you don't want to miss any of the stuff I put out, get my thoughts on all kinds of stuff happening around football, or interact with me, all my social media handles are linked down below, as well as on the screen right now. And of course I'd love to hear any of your thoughts of this series, suggestions for future projects, and questions you may have in the comments. Otherwise I hope to talk to you all soon. So until then, see you later. Peace!